were 4 tribal members who were picked up by ICE in a community called Little Earth right here in Minneapolis, St. Paul. They claim that they're not classifying them by their nationality, which tribal members are also citizens of the United States since 1924. You know, there's nobody more American than American Indians. They came all the way here to retrieve their tribal members who were captured by ICE, and we failed in that mission today, but it will continue. Stay vigilant and stay assertive, stay constructive. We're in unprecedented times, the way that I see it.
Welcome to Outside Issues with Audrey and Patrick. When Renee Good was killed, it was on January 7th. So that would be almost 2 weeks ago. It was on a Wednesday. And I'm looking at my calendar now just because I'm trying to piece it together. What was I in the middle of when that happened? Because it's probably for the best that my usual digest of political media has been more intermittent now instead of constant.
I know, because my whole weeks are always blurs because of my job. But I saw just the headline, and then I saw the video, and I was like, holy shit. And after that, ever since then, I feel like everything's been kind of futile. I was bracing myself for, the administration and everybody to be like, oh, she tried to run over him with her car, because usually police have immunity to that kind of shit, shooting people and whatnot. So my first thought was shit, here we go again. We're going to be blaming the victim. I think this is a little bit different than what I'm used to. This is an emergency. This is a national emergency. I know that Bob Ferguson here in Washington has declared a state of emergency. There have been raids in the town sort of next to me, which is pretty affluent. It's pure brutality. And my first thought when I knew that she was a white woman, this idea of ultimate privilege that I have, which I do have a lot of privilege as a white person, somebody coming from an affluent area growing up. Now it's everybody's head on the chopping block. I don't know, it's hard to explain as a woman, the line that Jonathan Ross said after he shot her is fucking bitch. And every single woman who's been in a relationship with an abuser has heard that.
Yeah, I figure, you've dealt with that. You've had men say that to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fucking bitch. Especially even at the most, innocuous things like, hey, can I get your number? And I say, oh, I'm taken. Oh, you're a fucking bitch. Well, it's not surprising to me. This was particularly triggering. The more and more that goes on with Trump's Gestapo, the more and more scared I am feeling.
Yeah, I heard an interesting psychoanalysis of this guy, Jonathan Ross, and then, the ICE Gestapo, is that their ultimate targets are really white women, or that is the object of their resentment. And it's a kind of resentment because white women aren't going with the program and aren't, conferring the appropriate respect, to them in uniform. And, I think that it's there's something there's such a ripe target, this lesbian couple sitting in their car, not deferring immediately, to these hogs.
As a woman, you can't show, I don't want to say sass, but standing your ground effectively against a man like that. You can't.
You're fucked either way, because if you meet that aggression with equal aggression, something terrible will happen. But if you're just diminutive and, just kind of passive about it, same goes, right?
The misogyny is real. Men like that don't like to be challenged. Not even challenged, just spoken to in a way that's not completely subservient. We can't show aggression. There's nothing. There's not, and we've been told since we were born, you have to be the sweet girl. You have to play nice, you have to be ladylike, do your, have your manners. It's just like exhausting. And then when you're faced with a man who's threatening, you have to shrink as that trauma response. And watching the video, it sounded like she wasn't really in a trauma response. She was in just a calm sort of, hey dude, I'm not mad at you. Like,
right. I think that they, in terms of like the narrative and the way that the Trump administration has tried to frame this and the conservative media constellation around him is that this was like some pointed standoff that Renee Good lost. Whereas it was much more a case of her trying to get through an intersection and being confused at conflicting instructions being screamed at her by heavily armed, scary guys that, and this guy murdered her just out of his personal frustration and hatred and resentment. She wasn't even standing off against him. She was trying to get the fuck out of the way.
And as a woman, if there's a man trying to get into your car like that agent, the other agent was, you get the fuck out, because that's so dangerous. The amount of fear that I would probably experience if some ICE agent was trying to open my car door, I would have done this. I mean, depending on, I guess, whatever my brain wants me to do, either fight, flight, or freeze, I probably would have fled, and the same thing would have happened. Like, what am I supposed to do? Fight and then get shot too? Am I supposed to freeze and then get shot too? The simple truth of walking down a street and knowing that a man is behind you, it doesn't matter who he is, it's always looking back. I've had abusive people try to open my car door, trying to get at me. I don't remember what I did. I must have frozen. But if I was trying to flee, I would have made a 3-point turn too. That's how cars work. We need to start thinking about the misogyny of these attacks. What I've been fighting for a very long time and very passionate about is the killing of BIPOC people by just regular police. Now I feel like my view on the regular police is gone a little bit higher, which is, who would have thunk it?
Your opinion of police that are more constrained, by legal apparatus that does exist, as opposed to these completely unaccountable murder lynch mobs that are flooding into blue cities now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. By contrast, the stand-up guys.
I just couldn't believe it. I saw a video where there was a city police officer. I think it was, I don't know much. It might have been in Texas, but he was following the agent, and he's like, "You're going to be under a fucking arrest if you don't get the hell away from us." And then the ICE agent goes away, and the cop's like, "Fucking wannabe." And I was like, yeah, fucking wannabe.
Yeah, I mean, one hopes that, more and more local police are answering the call. And, I think that what a lot of us are in a panic about is agents of the state going to intervene and protect the citizens from ICE, or are the citizens going to need to take matters into their own hands? And I think that for the longevity of, polite society, I think we're hoping that it can be the state muscle that can step in and protect people. But for as long as that doesn't happen, I think that the Trump administration just has one speed, which is to escalate. And I just feel like even well-meaning liberal governors like Tim Walz, it's in their essence to want to calm things down and to want to de-escalate and to want to try and to do things like send a letter to the president pleading for him to turn down the temperature. Remember when we had Jake on the show and he was talking about the paradox of tolerance? Is that when only one side in a conflict is attempting to de-escalate and then the other side is just flooring the gas. No, it's the ratchet's only going one way. At some point there will need to be a confrontation. And this is where we are. It's messing with my head. I just don't understand these people. I don't understand the violence of Trump. Don't they get it that there's this bipartisan agreement, Democrat and Republican at the top, to just fleece the American people and to have a really nice life for themselves, to have photo ops in the Rose Garden, and you get to have ceremonies where you put medals on John Voight and all of your idiot, like friends, or, but both sides get to flatter themselves. And, Congress and the Senate move very slowly. People die and people lose their health care and get crushed underfoot. But there's like a level of stability that, is maintained, and that people like you and me criticize constantly because we hate it and we see the human cost. But this urge by MAGA, and my buddy reminded me of how integral to all this Stephen Miller is. What we're seeing now with ICE in these cities is so much of like a Stephen Miller straight up neo-Nazi design. And I think Trump, it's number one, he's kind of into it. And number two, he loves to delegate. And so I think that, this war on the American people by an American president is just something that like we're all racing to catch up with, because it's so like antithetical to the way we see the world and the way that we think government, what its essential function should be. And how do we fight it? It's corrosive in every way. The idea of meting out combat against federal agents on the street of these cities where people live. The Chapo's guys have been calling Minneapolis the Midwest Bank. Now it's this war zone. Where where they're sending troops in to hurt and to terrorize the citizens. And you had asked, you sent me this text, and I only got to it earlier this morning. I figured we could talk about it, but you were asking Trump going hard with ICE in California, then in Minnesota, states of Kamala and Walz. If there's anything to that, if there's an element of his vindictiveness that has to do with him allocating so many assets here. And I think, that you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that's part of it. It's all part of it. I mean, I think that like Trump's, one of his like primary operating modes is vindictiveness and revenge and putting people in their place who, said he had small hands.
Trump and, Kristi Noem, every official that's endorsing this, every single ICE agent is an abuser, because abusers want power and control. That's it. They don't want material things. They don't want, to make the neighborhood safe. They want power and control because of whatever the fuck has happened in their lives, that likely wasn't their fault. If we're going way back and getting real clinical here with like childhood trauma, but there are plenty of people who are all abusers using this power and control dynamic. And I'll have to show you the wheel of violence at some point, because in the very middle, there's different types of abuse. There's financial abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, child abuse. And in the middle of it, it's all power, control. And Trump, and I'm going to go ahead and say it, undiagnosed person with narcissistic personality disorder, they all crave power and control. So all these agents, I have yet to see anybody film an agent that's got something short of an attitude that doesn't radiate power and control. Somebody needs to fear me. Fear, being in a spot and a position of fear, trying to inflict fear, is something that I think a lot of abusers and sometimes regular people who have gone through shit, they want that because they were scared as little people. And like I said, I don't want to get too clinical here, but
please, I could use the help, because it's really fucked up. And you think about these people like Noem and Miller and Trump and Vance. We haven't even mentioned him yet. They're in the upper reaches of power, global power. And how much more control could they want? How much more would it take for them to feel okay with themselves? And the answer has to be that their need is bottomless.
Yeah.
And and totalizing, because I feel like That's what I'm getting at, is that like, even for somebody who's been, I think of myself as pretty politically aware the last 10 years, this shocks even me. Just the, the extent of the brutality and why they just keep pushing after like they've won every contest. They've got all three branches. Then it doesn't seem to be enough. And there's some chatter that, and I'm sure there's something to it about how they want to basically make midterm elections and presidential elections really difficult to organize because of the chaos in the cities, and they get to implement the Insurrection Act, and this is part of some like 5-dimensional chess game that they're playing basically to to keep Trump in power until he's dead. But like, I feel like as much as that's probably true, they just love this process, even beyond the outcome. I think just to deploy ICE in this way is richly satisfying to them, and that scares me because I'm fortunate enough to not have like people like that in my life, people with those violent urges, or the stomach, the twistedness to follow those through.
You're either labeled a rioter or a peaceful protester. We already know that ICE is going after peaceful protesters, no matter what. But what's that medium between civil disobedience, like good trouble, as
John Lewis
would say, good trouble, versus going too far and forfeiting our need for pacifism and for peace, especially those of us who have gone through shit and found peace, like in recovery. And we're having to visit that again. Personally, I have, like, I'll just go ahead and say it. Like, I want to buy a gun. I'm scared. A white woman got shot in the head because she said, "I'm not mad at you, dude." And that's how I interact with police. I've been pulled over one time here in Washington, and because I worked with the LAPD for a couple of years and I know how I just know police, I guess, just from experience. And whenever this cop pulled me over, he's like, you were going over the speed limit. And I used the word dude. I was like, sorry, dude, won't do it again. Like, just like that, like kind of sarcastic, dry. If that was an ICE agent, I could have gotten shot. What am I going to do to protect myself from getting fucking murdered? And I like what keeps swirling around is this guilt having to do with, going back to, 2012, thinking about the Sandy Hook shooting and all of the legislation that was trying to be passed in the aftermath of that. And nothing got passed, obviously, because of the gun lobbyists. But I think that we're getting to a point where the Second Amendment is possibly going to be serving its second purpose, the right to bear arms or to stand up against a tyrannical government. And for me personally, I don't want to get killed. And I can't even, it's so mind-boggling to me that I'm like, get me a gun, because fuck, I don't know.
I think that video, I'm sure you watched it, a lot of people did, of the DoorDash, the DoorDasher hiding in the woman's house, and ICE pestering them at the front door, and both of these poor women, but like she has to decide whether she's going to give this woman over to ICE. And thank God, ultimately, they were able to, her and then the neighbors that had started to kind of like crowd around the property were able to repel ICE and, like live to fight another day. But like, yeah, but I mean, I had this conversation with my girlfriend about, what do you do in that situation? What if you've got to choose between, your family with you at home and an immigrant being hunted by ICE who, comes to you looking for safe quarter? Like, the parallels between this and Nazi Germany couldn't be more explicit. Yeah, I mean, there's no way, I don't know what I would do in that situation. I mean, I would hope that I had the courage to tell them to go fuck themselves. But the stakes, they're life or death stakes now. It's happening right up close.
I think a point about de-escalation and escalation, from a clinical standpoint, most of us, we don't have to, but it's more for inpatient settings, de-escalation of like a fight or some violent incident, like between patients, or you have a client who is becoming increasingly aggressive towards you. We're taught specific de-escalation techniques, which obviously have to do with words and comfort and validation for the individual. But this de-escalation does not exist unless I'm speechless. The de-escalation might involve both sides inciting violence. And from a clinical standpoint, that goes against everything I've ever learned or been trained in, or who I am in general, especially with, my ancestral background of being Quakers and all pacifists.
I love your Quaker ancestors watching over you always.
I'm guessing they're pretty pissed. They're thinking, oh, here come the Puritans trying to force shit on everybody. And I don't know if the Puritans tried to kidnap people, but same shit. What does de-escalation at this point look like? Is it...
Well, I think that what it looks like is some kind of cooperative effort state by state, or if there was something that the state governments were able to do in terms of, declaring, some have declared a state of emergency, but like in terms of like, they have the ability, as far as I understand it, to call the National Guard and deploy National Guard troops against ICE. This would be a definite escalation, and they'd have to ask themselves, well, who's going to be the first ones to blink here? I think, but basically, yeah, like what a de-escalation would look like at this point is to meet force with force and to intervene on behalf of the citizens, and for the government to do that, not for vigilantes to do that, but for the government to do that, which would require a major bending, if not outright breaking, the rules, or at the very least like norms and typical standard operating procedure. And basically, yeah, like making it a fight, but doing it, in an organized way, and doing it in daylight, and using media to basically like say, this is what we're doing and why, so that if the president decides to go against that, the world will see it for what it is. Abolishing ICE is finding outright plurality support, according to some polls. So the push to expand funding or restrict funding for ICE, who is behind abolishing or not? Against abolishing ICE: John Fetterman from Pennsylvania, Ruben Gallego from Arizona, Chris Murphy from Connecticut, Democratic Party leaders Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, Cory Booker from New Jersey. And support is coming from the usual suspects, from AOC, from Ilhan Omar, from the handful of progressives who, see no issue with calling a spade a spade. There's this article I read by Edinger Mentum. It's called "This Isn't 2020." And he does a great job of parsing the difference between the calls to abolish or defund police that came out of the George Floyd protests in 2020, which failed across the board, and the calls to abolish ICE today, which it's a very similar context, because Renee Good was murdered less than a mile away, actually, in Minneapolis, from where George Floyd was murdered. So it's like parallels, it's like we're revisiting a lot of the same territory. But he writes in this article, ICE doesn't have strong bonds with any community. It's run by a historically unpopular president, not locally known municipal politicians. It doesn't provide any public services by wasting your money to harass construction workers and creating short-form social media content for the hyper-engaged MAGA base. Opposing the organization isn't genuinely radical in the way that calls to defund or abolish the police actually were. It's a basic conclusion anyone opposed to Trump will come to, as long as he uses them as a personal secret police. So I feel like what he's articulating here is why abolishing ICE is popular, and it's only going to gain popularity for as long as it's associated with the regime, and as for as long as there's no positive outcome associated with it. If you aren't, if you aren't like an ideologically motivated race warrior on the right, which a minority of people are, thank God. A lot of squishy racists in America, but maybe they're not that squishy when it comes to their own cities,
Yeah.
being invaded by paramilitary squads in masks.
There's also something to be said about the Epstein files. I saw a brief interview with the QAnon shaman.
I miss that guy.
The interviewer asked him, "Do you still support Trump?" Guy's like, "No, he's a pedophile." And I was like,
he's hung up his horns.
Yeah,
traded it for a collared shirt.
I lost Trump at grab him by the pussy.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny. I don't think I've ever. I mean, I'm a libtard. I have been for as long as I've been alive. But so any Republican's going to have a nearly vertical uphill battle with me. But I mean, it would be hard. I mean, that ride down the escalator. I mean, in his announcement for his candidacy, right? It was, let's build a wall around America and keep the rapists out. Like, that
was the radical thing at the time.
Well, yeah. I mean, he lost me when I was in the womb, I think.
I keep running across sound bites of ICE agents come up to a neighborhood. Everybody, all the neighbors are like, "Shut your door, get inside, shut your door, they're here." Whistles going off. I think I posted on Facebook that's the most disturbing thing for me, is the people blowing whistles like a nuclear siren.
Yeah, I mean, I'll add the image. I hear that there's cars strewn throughout Minneapolis that are abandoned with the seatbelts cut, of people who were stopped and, abducted from their vehicles. And, it's like a war zone.
Mm-hmm.
And when that term war zone is deployed in the mainstream media, usually it's meant to kind of as like a condemnation of resistance to state violence. It's a war zone if you fight back. It's not a war zone if the damage is on behalf of agents of the state. But I mean, despite the best efforts of mainstream media trying to normalize ICE's behavior, I think people can see it for what it is. And it's, the chaos is the calls coming from inside the house.
I was like, like Project 2025 is going to happen. There's going to be National Guards involved in blue states. We have to throw them off somehow. There's more of us than them.
What cruelty, attacking people for the crime of their plurality, harboring their neighbors. Yeah, the story of America is melting pot, and then the racial resentment that goes along with that.
I hope that all of that administration end up in a melting pot and they get turned into fondue.
Hot lava.
Floor's lava.
I was just going to say, January 30th, the government could be facing a shutdown. There's a subcommittee. Senator Katie Britt is leading the Appropriations Subcommittee on Homeland Security, is fighting tooth and nail to expand ICE's reach. The Democratic wall is holding firm, though. Senator Patty Murray from Washington is. Are you familiar with her?
Yeah.
Yeah. She's the top Democrat on the full Appropriations Committee. So they do not want an increase in ICE funding. But if you can believe it, Kristi Noem and others in the Trump administration, they want to expand ICE's funding even further.
What is government?
We've had a couple other instances like this in the first year of Trump too, where Democrats have the opportunity to stop the government, slow the Trump administration down, and bring them to the table for concessions. And I think that, at least on legislative level, this is something that can be done to, advocate for people on a leadership level anyway. On a personal level, stay in touch with your neighbors and don't give an inch. As strong as your stomach is, just hold firm. And even if you're scared, try to be somebody else's strength.
I heard somebody give a good point about checking on your neighbors. If you see a neighbor's car parked in the same place, just gathering dust, if you see their mail being stuffed in the mailbox up to the brim, what happened? Something could have happened. Can't lie, I'm scared.
I know we say this every week, but we need to get Marissa back on to talk about some legal pathways that we can follow to try and look out for people. I'm sure she's got her hands full with all this.
Oh yeah, she's in Mexico currently. She has two residences, as far as I know. So she's currently out of the country. And back in December of 2024, I remember her telling me that she was scared that she was going to get deported because of just the nature of her work, obviously, and her outright opposition to Trump's administration immigration policies. And she's like, I'm legit scared that I'm going to be sent back to Mexico. I've been here since I was 2 years old. And, I always think of Marissa. I wish Marissa could run for president, abolish the two-party system, and let's just have Audrey and Patrick.
Yeah, I'm down with that.
Nein, you don't understand it. We are only taking the bad Jews, yeah? The bad Jews. The bad Juden, not the good Juden. Some of the Juden were doing usury, and we are taking them, not the bad ones. Or not the good ones, just the bad ones. I can't speak for everyone else in the SS, but mine unit is only taking the bad Jews and not the good ones.